Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by George Charles Osterholt. How you doing, George? You okay, my friend?
I'm doing really well.
Good. We're just talking about busy schedules, and this is the third time lucky for me and you, mate, isn't it? But we got there in the end.
We made it happen.
Cool. No, it's nice to see you, my friend. Proper post-COVID podcasting as well. I've purchased a new microphone this week because I thought my old microphone was fine. My old microphone was working yesterday, and then today neither are working. Hope the sound quality is okay. I'm on my Apple headphones, so I hope they're holding up. We can hear each other okay, George, can't we?
Yes, sir, we can.
For those that don't know you, my friend, I was going to do a bit of an intro. I know you've managed relatively sizable teams in restaurants before you got into security. You were also an advisor at Indiana University. You have been at Scientia now for around 4 years. You've had multiple promotions. Started off as a security system analyst specialist, then got promoted to cybersecurity lead, and you are now the lead cybersecurity engineer. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Happy to be here. It's great to see you again and have a chat.
Yeah, no, likewise, man. I know I've done you a bit of an intro there, but I can never do it as well as you. And I always like to start off with, what's a day in the life like? What do you get up to? What's going down in the life of George right now?
As far as work, I'm blessed. I work remotely and I work from home. My opportunities to spend time with my daughter and walk her to school and all those things, I'm really blessed with the opportunity to be able to do that. The technology that we have now, such as Teams, allow me to stay connected with my team remotely. We have some fun chats and some banter, and the memification of the world is always a little bit when you work with the younger folks, but it's always fun. Being able to stay connected, stay on task. We basically work agile development. And so there's a lot of cyclical aspects and making sure that we have an opportunity to, I'm not so busy as a supervisor that I'm in meetings all day, but at the same time, I have meetings that I have to work with my team remotely to make sure that we hit KPIs and different things like that. A lot of what I do is preparation right now for CMMC assessment. That's a huge thing going on in the US right now. Anybody that's in the defense industrial base. The space that I work in is really changing in real time. I think the CIO, Katie Arrington, yesterday announced that they're going to update the RMF with some 10 goalposts. We need to get this done faster. So luckily, I already work with a group of people that are in that mind state. And we've already shifted left with kind of our DevSecOps. And so a lot of the partners we work with really allow us to help them hone and tailor systems in a way that is at the kind of cutting edge of what's expected with development.
It's for CMMC, it's interesting. I think even the biggest naysayers that thought it was never going to happen, they believe it's real now.
I think everybody wants to figure out how to not have to spend money till they have to spend the money, which makes sense from a business and a margins end. But in the same way, security is almost like privacy. You can sell the fact that you are a security-minded organization or a privacy-minded organization, and it puts you ahead in the future as opposed to working from the old timeline of, I'll wait to see if I really have to do it. I think GDPR and compliance frameworks have already shifted everybody to understand if you want to do business, you need to do it with the respect of individuals, not fully with privacy, but at least making sure that you're respecting them as your customer. I think that's a huge part of it.
Do you know what, George? I think it's huge for a few reasons. I notice it big time now because I'm talking about security all day and recruiting security folks all day. If ever I go to do anything and there's not two-factor authentication, you really notice it. I think from the customer's point of view, it's massive. But also, if you're selling cybersecurity services, it becomes not just selling it as something they've got to pay for because they have to pay for it. You're selling it as almost like a feature of the business, which is probably a good way to get budget sign-off.
Yeah, we have a baseline expectation of everybody that we work with that they have at least Security Plus, whether they're a developer, whether they're a UI or Java developer. So there's already discussion. We have our cybersecurity team sitting in all development meetings from the very beginning. We've also been very successful with the old style of authority to operate and being successful in gaining ATOs that allow systems to be fielded. We've shown that we can really interact with the compliance software and what the frameworks are within the DIB space and the DoD space. And we've shown success. And it's really because everybody that we work with thinks about, at minimum, even where they're drawing the packages, right? So we're paying attention to our supply chain. We're staying ahead of the game. We also do some internal cybersecurity where we have our scene set up and we have our network systems, log analysis, and those kind of things. We've just added some people that are really interested in that blue team aspect to an even higher level. Now, some of it in theory is you do it because it's compliance, but they really have fun doing the threat analysis in the beginning. We've really had a lot of fun sitting down and doing our tabletops for incident response. We've really tailored our incident response to work with the skills of our team. Every time we do it, we learn something new and somebody says, well, I'm excited about learning more about that. I wouldn't go all the way into gamification of cybersecurity, but in that idea of it, I used to play basketball. It's about reps. If I shoot 100 free throws, I may not hit a good percentage the first 10, 15 times I do it. But as I do it more, I really hone that skill and I get better. And I did when I was younger. So it's just a matter of practice. It also allows you to do the identification aspect, which is basically the first step. You need to know what you have in order to protect it, especially in systems that can be complex. It's a whole system approach to engineering.
The thing about the compliance side as well, it's like people are into different things. I talk to some people that absolutely love the compliance side, whether it's CMMC, NIST 853, SOC 1, SOC 2, whatever it might be. They love it and they love that client-facing interaction and they can add loads of value there and have loads of success there. You get other guys and girls that just want to be like deep into red team operate stuff, malware analysis, don't want to talk to anyone. And to some people, that idea of almost being like head down and doing code review, whatever it might be, to some people, that's just not entertaining at all. For others, it's highly stimulating. It's just, different things get different people excited.
Absolutely. Teams change, right? One of the things about the space I'm currently working in is you see some changeover with our partners that we're doing development for. And so you have to figure out how to communicate with those customers that are different. Sometimes you have to catch them up on what's already been done or what the changes are going forward. But within your own team, you see some changeover. And so really one of the best things about the owners, partners, and upper management within the organization that I'm in is they really make it important that we ask the folks that we work with really what they want to do and then work to get tools available to allow them to do those things. Obviously, we had guardrails. We're not hiring people and saying, hey, this is a playland, have fun. But at the same time, we give them the opportunity to really stick their nose into the things that they want to, and then just communicate about the pros and the cons, where they're at. We do something called Lunch and Learns where people can present what they've really dug into and show off what cool thing they've been able to do, whether it be software networking, automation for some of the scanning within the network, and different things like that. It's a lot of fun.
I think delivering stuff back to the team, yes, it helps the team and it helps improve the knowledge of the team. And it also reinforces that particular skill set or set of knowledge for the person that's delivering it as well, because they're reciting it. So it's like win-win. It's helping the team and it's helping the individual. And I think that's pretty cool. And also, it's good fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it brings the team. You find it with, it's interesting, George, like the different subsections of security. There's so much going on out there in the market. Like some companies are having a terrible time. Some companies are still doing really well. It's such a divisive market. It's interesting to hear you talk about the DIB stuff and the CMMC, and that is clearly an area where demand's going to be up and coming. But it's like there's so many different subsections in security. It's nice to hear you're doing well in different areas. It might get other business owners and leaders thinking, because maybe some of these traditional types of security at the minute, maybe that is quite a hard way to operate, or maybe some of the new regulations coming through is a bit of the pockets of positivity.
Yeah, and I think I'm really blessed because I work with really smart people who are all working with the same sort of ultimate bottom line of protecting the warfighter, because we work in the intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance space. Because of that, you get to play around with AI and ML and computer vision. You get to work with cybersecurity and figuring out how to make sure that data at rest, data in use, and data in transit are all being protected. One of the nice things about the compliance space is it helps to create a pilot's checklist, so to speak. I've heard that spoken about at conferences that I've been at in the past. And the idea of planes were going down in World War II until they actually sat down and said, all right, let's just go through every time before we take off. Let's fill out this checklist, right? We're compliant with all the things that we need to make sure are right. And then the amount of planes that ended up coming back got significantly higher. And so compliance almost forces you to come up with a pilot checklist that works for your organization. Now, to the thing that you were speaking about with companies and organizations, it's all kind of budget-based. And I snuck a peek at your new shorts videos that you're doing. And I think one of the things you mentioned was, like, let's say 5 to 8 years ago, interest rates were super low, so people could borrow money and expand that way. That's somewhat gotten constrained. And I think that's where the CMMC thing falls in, is people are worried. One of the reasons people took so long to do it is because they were worried, I'm going to spend the money and then I'm not going to have to get certified. But at the same time, you spent the money and protected your users' systems. And so what is your budget really for? It's to allow you to either grow, maintain, but at what rate? And it's always based on what the organization's stakeholders. Cybersecurity is about making sure that the business is successful, the users can do what they need to do, but also they do it in a way that protects the systems and the people that you interact with going forward. You got to be honest and trustworthy, and integrity is very important. Protecting people is very important. But if you can't afford to do it, you got to figure out strategies to be able to do it. And sometimes that's the nice thing about the NIST sort of setup and the CMMC is they don't tell you how to do control, the whatever access control it is. They just tell you, this is what you need to do. How does your organization do it is what you have to prove. And so how do you do it? Sometimes there's compensating controls because you're limited in what you have available. But at the same time, you have to be thinking defense in depth as much as you can. If you can't do, let's say an organization can't afford CrowdStrike, right? There's some other open source options out there, but you have to pay somebody to manage those. That's the nice thing about CrowdStrike. They have top tier people getting things set up so you don't have to look at it every second of the day. But at the same time, most people can't afford that, but you still have to hire somebody that can do it. I work in an organization where I'm really lucky we get to do multiple things at the same time. But when we're able to put our different hat on and say, all right, there's a potential incident, I need to sit down, we need to do incident response right now. And our partners understand that if we miss one of the 3 meetings that we have in a week, we always have a good reason why.
Yeah, thanks, George. You said loads of stuff there. In a good way, you've said loads of stuff there that's like really got the cogs turning. And it's like the interest rate stuff, it would be nice to just touch upon that because I think there's a lot we can explain that will, if anyone out there is struggling, it will hopefully make them feel better. For everyone listening, if you go on my LinkedIn profile, the short video George is referring to, I did a breakdown of how economic factors basically affect hiring demand and how everything works in cycles. Whenever we're in a booming hot market, we're heading towards a bust. And whenever we're in a bust, we're heading back towards a boom. That's the nature of every global economy around the world, not just the US economy. But yeah, it's interesting, just before we do talk about that, George, it's interesting about the security piece. It's reminding your end customers that think, oh, do we need to spend the money? It's hang on, remember what this is for. It's actually about keeping your customers safe and keeping your reputation. It's not just about doing it because you have to, but it's hard to get that message across. There's a noticeable difference, and I've noticed on the hiring side, there's a noticeable difference between a company that's been, unfortunately, to say this, there's a noticeable difference between a company that's been hit before and a company that hasn't or has been breached. And one that hasn't, this might be the $1 million question, but how do you get it into their heads that it is really important, even if they haven't been hit? It's quite a tricky thing to do, isn't it, with some companies?
It's ROI, right? I think there's some economy of cybersecurity, like the FAIR Institute. They've set up some tools that allow you to say, this is what the cost of cybersecurity is. And I haven't really entrenched myself in there, but it's not the sky is falling, like Chicken Little sort of thing. But at the same time, it's like, what is your plan as an organization going forward in the long term? Are you a company that's just looking to be there for let's say the person on top's like career cycle, right? And then is the company going to go forward after that? What are your long-term plans? If you have long-term plans with everything changing, whether it be the interest rates or the economics, that's ebb and flow. If you're not investing in securing the technologies that you're using, the likelihood that your organization will last has decreased significantly. But how do you show that in a quantifiable way, because I can qualify all those things, but how do you really show that in numbers? And you really pull up, this is what the cost of data breaches have been for organizations. And even if you want to do a straight ratio, they may be a $1 billion company, and we may be, let's say, we'll go even lower, like a $1 million company. Even if you just do a straight ratio, do you have that much money? Most organizations are probably looking at cyber insurance, but even with cyber insurance, you still have a compliance. You have to prove that you're doing certain things for someone to insure you. I've really been like digging my head a lot. I recently got a certification through ISC Squared in the zero trust space. I'm really interested in that. Never trust, always verify, but there's a cost to that because you have to have a system. AI resources that are being pumped up all over the place. There's a huge expense to it from a macro end, sociological and that kind of end. But those are resources that are available that allow people to do things at a rate of speed they weren't able to do before. So some of those policy systems you're setting up to verify that this subject is authorized to have access to this object can happen a lot quicker than it used to. But to your question, because I tend to go off on little forks in the road, but I think really the thing is, what are the things that you can do to protect your organization, protect the people that you work with? They're your partners. They're the people you care about for the most part. Because you hired them, you trust them. You want them to be with your organization. How are you going to make sure that them and your customers, outside of the people you work with every day, the people you never see but are still your partners, are as safe as possible? And yes, there's a little bit of a cost to that, but I'll use an analogy. Would you rather the school that your kid goes to has a whole bunch of books and some computer resources in their library, or would you want that not to exist? And when you think about it in that analogous way, it's what are the things that you could do to broaden your impact of being a good person and why you ultimately got into what you're doing. If what you got into was to make profit, if you get hit, people are going to lose trust in you. And if there's a competitor out there that says, we won't let your stuff disappear, they're going to probably go to them. And so you got to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, definitely, George. I think as well, like you used the word there, you talked about a dollar amount, you used the word ROI. And I think especially when you're talking to non-technical decision makers, stakeholders, that is a language that people in the commercial world, you start talking in terms of ROI and dollars, they listen.
And if you're a CISO or if you're someone that is in charge of the head of a cyber team within an organization, you should really dig into the FAIR Institute stuff and start figuring out how can I put quantifiable like diagrams up in the same way that the FCO would be doing. So I can say, this is why this is important. And this is why we should shift our strategy in this space towards this resource or this tool and not completely get rid of the other one, because obviously it takes testing before you go to production. But at the same time, how do you start implementing some of those other perspectives to better tailor your spend?
Definitely. I think as well, like, again, use the word quantifiable. It's like just having concrete examples. If you found the coolest cross-site scripting or SQLi, whatever, like people outside of security, they don't care. They might not even understand it. I'm imagining if anyone at CISO or VP level listening to this will, I'm sure, know this, but for anyone who is on the way up and progressing in their cybersecurity career, like if you're explaining stuff, they need hard, concrete, they need ROI examples, they need to know what it means in a dollar amount. They just need it in absolute plain English. Like when you're talking amongst your team, maybe when you're doing your lunch and learn, George, like you do internally, probably the time to talk about some really cool findings and really enhance people's capabilities. But when you're delivering, they just want to know what it means, mate, don't they?
Yeah. They want to know ultimately what's going to cost, what it's going to look like, what the lawyer needs to write into the contracts, and what potentially the marketing side can say to make it benefit the brand itself, right? Like there's a lot of branding that goes on with big organizations. And how do you make caring about people's privacy and or caring about the security of their assets that they're trusting you with a brand? Like how do you communicate that to them so they say, yes, I am willing to spend 5% more than I would normally do because I trust you more.
Yeah. Cool. We'll talk about the economy, George. You mentioned something about AI vulnerabilities, and this all ties into it because, and these said you're going off on a tangent, but I don't think you will. I think it's like really all links in because I think like, I'm sure you're seeing it, but like some like old school vulnerabilities that were really hard to find. Now that AI is in the mix, all of a sudden, prompt injection, some of these like vulnerabilities are like really coming back to the forefront. And I can remember when I first started getting into cybersecurity, just as I was getting into recruitment, I was reading about hacking like for hours and hours. I got really obsessed with it really quickly. And I can remember initially thinking, wherever the technology goes, security just has to follow. Like obviously everyone is talking about AI every day, and then they're going AI and then efficiency. So that means layoffs. But I'm like, now hang on, look, wherever AI goes and whatever it does that's phenomenal, and I'm sure it's going to do some amazing things. I just feel that maybe there's some lag time there, but I just feel security has to follow.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's been a lot of really good work being done on the AI, especially agentic AI sort of space. And I think, as speaking of branding, I think OWASP has proven that they know what they're talking about over the years. And so organizations always ultimately say, okay, so how do we implement OWASP into our, like the top 10 into our scanning structure? Or how do we look at what OWASP is saying about where this AI boom and this fast tracking of implementation and integration into systems? Yes, we want to get to it right away, but can we do that while we're looking at the top 10 as we implement? How do we test this in a way that allows us to take advantage of everything that is included in the AI, but how do we not have all noise and how do we trust it? And I think to your point, in theory, a lot of what I've read in the press is, oh, it's going forward, move forward and break things sort of strategy, and it's all going to happen before the cyber gets in there. But you can't slow it down. The wave has already crested the wall. And so the question is, while the water's going over it, still make the wall higher. And I think cybersecurity is never going to be in front of innovation. No, people feel like you're saying no to them.
Yeah.
If I use this, I always used this when I was in the restaurant too, was people would ask for something. And one of the mantras for one of the organizations, I used to work for a company called Fleming's Prime Steakhouse and Wine Bar. And their mantra at the time, and I'm not sure if it is now because I haven't been there in a while, was whatever it takes. And so it was always yes with caveats, right? I can do this, but these are the other things that we need to do to make sure that we can do this to get what you want, but also make sure that what you want doesn't end up being what you don't want in the long term. And so it's always that idea of yes with caveats. Let's slow down. Let's really get an idea of what we're talking about, and let's go forward.
Yeah, I really like that because yes with caveats could probably actually really almost mean the same thing as no, but it stops the security department from being like the fun police. It's quite a cool way to do it. I like it.
It's how you approach that communication. If you notice through logs or through your SIEM or something else that somebody is doing activity that is not permitted, how do you know that person's kid isn't sick? And so they're trying to get something done before they take him to the doctor. Because ultimately we're working with people that have more than just Control-Alt-Delete on their mind, right? When they're doing things. And so it's how you communicate to people, this is the direction that our organization is going to go. We're not going to demand that it happens now, but we're also going to help you towards understanding it better. One of the things that I'm in charge of with my organization is our cybersecurity training. And so we do quarterly training, and I try and find videos that aren't an hour and a half with tests that are 20 minutes long. Everybody already has to do CEUs, like continuing education units. So they're already doing training things. So what I try and concentrate on is short tidbits that have something to do with how do you recognize or how do you deal with email attachments, right? They could be malicious. You don't know if they're malicious, right? How do you deal with not clicking? If you're going to look for a resource, a tool that you need to use that's outside of, let's say, a registry that we have of whitelisted sort of resources, what is best practice to make sure you're not getting some sort of SEO crap that is going to try and download a weird DLL on your thing, right? Or how do I communicate in a way that says, don't do this?
Yeah.
And these are the sort of things that people are trying to do to mess with you getting things done in an urgent and efficient way. And these are the ways that you can recognize it. Professor Gene Camp, Dr. Gene Camp was somebody I worked with during my undergrad and my graduate work. And she was the one that helped me to get the position as the advisor for the Cybersecurity Club at IU. And she was always working with folks doing research. She's been at the forefront of the SBOM for the supply chain risk. Like, how do I know that what I'm getting from you has been stamped as not going to poison my system? But it's a hard thing to do because people do develop data and software in different ways. But one of the things that she always worked with research-wise was visible security. It's great that there's a little WAP at the top of my browser when I type in the address for the URL that I'm working. But is that enough to get people to trust that what they're doing? And most of the time people don't care. They just need to get done what needs to get done.
Yeah. I think as well, having that level of communication, George, the compound effect of that is big because humans don't really act on logic. They act on emotion. And if you've got that free-flowing communication, I think the minute you're viewed as, I use that term, fun police, or the minute you just seems like you're just trying to stamp out everything, that's when probably people go off and shadow IT and do this, that, and the other, and then everything breaks down, and then security postures are ultimately in a worse place. So all these things just make such a big difference. And I think sometimes in security, it's just so easy to get wrapped up in thinking about it from our point of view. But like you just said, ultimately, a lot of people, they just want to get stuff done. They just want to get their jobs done and get on with their day. So it's trying to explain it in a way where they can still do that. But security is, because there's a balance with everything, practicality and security. You're always trying to get the balance, essentially, aren't you?
Yeah. One of my experiences as a bartender really kind of helped me figure out how to communicate with people in different mindsets. Sometimes people are different when we sit down for that first Johnny Walker Black than they are when they are at their dinner. And it's figuring out how to make sure that people are still enjoying the interaction, but also making sure they're safe.
Yeah, I said this on the pod recently, George, but I had another guest called Josh on who ran a restaurant as well, much like yourself. And he said to me, he was like, if you can run a restaurant and a team of people in the restaurant in rush hour, he went, working in an MSP, MSSP, cybersecurity consultancy, he went, you'll manage it absolutely fine because handling a restaurant in rush hour, he was like, takes some serious skills.
Oh, yeah. You never know what's going to come. We were having a wine dinner. We used to do quarterly wine dinners, and we would bring in winemakers, mostly from California, because the company I worked for had really good partnerships with the winemakers in Napa Valley and Sonoma. And so we really had the advantage of having really great wines on our list. So we would have a wine dinner, and a winemaker would come and talk about their wines, and we would do a wine and food pairing. One time, like, I guess second course, this woman just started choking and was having a really hard time. And I got in there, and one of the servers that was working just happened to know CPR and had done some first responder work on the side. And it was serving to make extra money because this is back in 2007. And so first responders weren't really making that much money. So he was trying to supplement his income. Luckily, he was there, and he jumped out of what he was doing directly into it. And that's from being trained. And then I also had done some lifeguarding when I was younger. So as he was starting to wear down in what he was doing, he was able to just tag me in. And then another one was, there was a gentleman that was so inebriated that he needed to be driven home. And so I had it in the middle of the shift. He had come in, I guess, inebriated, and the bartender was like, I don't know what's going on with him. This is when I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And luckily I knew him and his wife and his family. So I just got him in the car and I drove him home and made sure he got from our space to his space safely. And you never know what's going to happen in the restaurant environment, from broken glass in the ice to somebody choking. Yeah. And the same thing happens in incident response.
Yes,
somebody on the team says, hey, I just noticed this on the log. Should we look into this? And boom, you transition from what you're doing, whether it's writing code or finishing off reviewing policy, or at least creating or updating policies, because that's iterative too. And you say, all right, get everybody in. This is what we practiced. Let's get it done now. Is it an incident? And a lot of times it's not, thank goodness, fingers crossed. But at least you practiced it, right? You need to be agile in all things in order to be successful. And I think the two things that I talked about with the restaurant work was, and that you brought up as well, was that idea of being able to change on the fly, to start doing something different, especially in security. If you're in incident response, be able to switch over. So that's one, be able to deal with outliers and oddities. But the other one is interacting with the customers as human beings, being able to communicate with people to get them what they need, because people don't always know how to ask for what they want. Like medium rare, in a weird way, is different for everybody, even though there's a specific definition. So you have to repeat it and make sure and know that they may not agree with it anyway, but be able to communicate, okay, let's figure it out and get it done for you. So those are the two things, was communication and being able to switch over on the fly.
Yeah,
so I was really lucky that I have those experiences.
Yeah, I think as well, switching over on the fly, adaptable, agile, whatever we want to call it, in this day and age, I think that particular skill set is just becoming increasingly more valuable as the days, weeks, months, and years go on, because the pace of change is so quick, whether it's technology in general, automation, AI, whatever it needs to be. Like, I think whoever is most adaptable will probably do pretty well moving forward.
And I think being able to read BS too, that was another skill with interacting with a lot of different people, is being able to understand what's BS and what's not. And I think that's important in the AI space, because AI doesn't have to explain to you how it got to its answer. Now, human beings probably always didn't tell you the truth of how they got to their answer. But I think Fred Kate had talked about that at one point in a discussion, that like a discussion that I saw him having. But you need to be able to discern, because AI sometimes is going to tell you what you want to hear, and that isn't beneficial towards the actual truth in where you need to go to expand, grow, or scale. So how do you figure that out too?
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone the other day, George. I was like, why doesn't it just say, like we teach people to do within our businesses, if you're speaking to a customer and you don't know the answer, just say you're not sure and you'll get back to them. For Christ's sake, don't make it up. The same thing we say to our team members and stuff like that. And he sounds like, I feel like saying the same thing to AI. If you're not sure, just tell me you're not sure. It's okay. Just don't make it up.
Yeah, it's all based on the data that it's gone through as well, right? What's its data pool? How is it seeing human beings communicating with other human beings? And if you feed it that sort of communication, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to ultimately reflect that. And I think that's going back to the idea of being trustworthy. And one of the cool things about cybersecurity when I got into it early, because I made a big transition to go back to school, and I wasn't a young man. So going back to finish up my undergrad and switch up, and then I was lucky enough to be able to get a master's degree that was taken care of by my employer. So I didn't go into huge debt there. But one of the things was I'd always had the ability to get into places I wasn't supposed to, almost in a social engineering way, but sometimes just in a brute force sort of way. But I never really broke the law, right? I just like to explore. And so I'm able to do that in a digital way instead of a physical way, because it's not as easy for me to climb on a third story fire escape at 51 as it was when I was 19.
I think you manage it, mate. I think you'd be okay. I'll give you a leg up. Cool. Thanks, George. Yeah, and I think as well, I was listening to your career journey there as well. It's just, for everyone listening, like, things just are never linear. They're never straightforward. I think, now, like, I've got this theory that by the time the likes of me and you may get up to the latter stages of our lives, I've got a feeling that people are going to be living to 90, 100 years old with AI and technology advances. I think with just people being around so much longer and the world changing so much faster, like, I think career pivots later in life are going to become very normal. And kudos to you for doing it, because I think, like, when you're going through it, it's like, oh God, am I really doing this? But I do think it's, at the time, it's probably quite scary. You come through it for the better.
Yeah, I was blessed because I had family happened to live in the community in Bloomington, Indiana at the time where I was doing because when I decided to go back to school, I was in Northern California. I had made some life changes and was just about to start doing wine sales as a transition from restaurant and wine stewardship. Realized that I had a whole bunch of credits I was sitting on back at Indiana University because I had gone to school there, but I decided to take a break. And they had started their school of informatics and computing. And when I got there, I thought about getting into development. But after sitting down and listening to the Fred Kate that I mentioned earlier, he gave a talk about protecting health data and the integrity of health data, and how personal it was to him because of the medical things that were challenging for him, and how important it was that he wanted people to be able to do this sort of AI machine learning processing with his data without it affecting his insurance or his opportunity to get a job or all the things that are threats and that why privacy is so important. And I transitioned immediately to cybersecurity because I was like, it's not just a matter of flipping the H key from a 1 to a 0 on a Windows machine. It's about making sure that somebody can live longer, like you were saying, to 100. And I think we're right at that. But cyber has to stay right there and be as close to the beginning of it as possible.
It does, because you're right. People aren't going to wait. Everyone's been getting too excited, myself included. Like, everyone's been getting so excited with AI. And for people listening, I definitely got too excited about what it could do. I think it's going to do some amazing things. That I think as a whole, like, if people are out there listening, everything's going to be okay. I think there'll be plenty of where some layoffs will occur because of AI. Some new opportunities will also occur because of AI.
Absolutely.
It'll be fine.
I completely agree with you. And I'll just go back to it's like anything else. There'll be opportunities within the AI space to be the person that makes sure that the system that's doing the machine learning is being fed well.
Yeah.
Like the integrity of that data, there's always going to be a need, because ultimately it's not going to tell you if it's being fed well or not. It doesn't have to. That's the whole advantage of why it's so efficient. But at the same time, there's going to need to be people there that are making sure that those guardrails are maintained within whatever the organization decides that they want to do in that space and how they want to utilize it to better help society or their customers or their bottom line and their profits. There's going to need to be people there that can help to make sure that it's not being fed crap.
Yeah, there is. Obviously, when PCI DSS or NIST, it will be another framework that will probably be legally, you have to have someone there making sure that AI isn't going off the rails, as it were. It's like, I'm sure that there'll be some regulation that will come in that will create loads of jobs. Back to your point about that video, George, is the more I look into it, I ended up spending a lot of weekends just studying the US economy, global economies. And long story short, it's like in the US, and this is the same in every economy in the world, but in the US economy, there's $3 trillion of cash and $50 trillion of credit. And it's, hang on a minute, if the bulk of the money in the US system and every system around the world is credit, if interest rates are high and that credit can't flow, then things are going to feel slow and the economy is going to feel sluggish. If the interest rates are low, which is what we saw in the COVID boom, then everything's going to feel phenomenal. But ultimately, it's debt cycles. When you're looking at it really close, or you've lost your job and you're running out of money or whatever it might be, the last thing you're probably going to do is watch a video on economics. You're panicking trying to get a job. But for people out there, it does all run in cycles. It will be okay. And we've been in a little bit of a down now for a while, so I think we're due some good times, mate.
I think things will be looking up, and I always look at it. So when COVID happened, I went from being in office every day to working from home. It changed how I had to approach, because at the time I was managing IT support for what's now called the Luddy School at Indiana University. So there were no students on campus, so I didn't need to be there. But that didn't mean we didn't need to be cycling through our life cycles in our computer labs, because even if we're being connected remotely, making sure that those remote connections and those keys that were being set up by our users were trusted and protected, making sure that the tools that the students are now having to use that they didn't even know how to use yesterday I'm available to answer questions for that. But I had to do that in my pajamas instead of in my semi-professional outfit as a manager. Like, those are the kind of things that are going to happen to people in their careers, no matter what. Power goes, when I was in the restaurant, power went out. And luckily, we were able to do credit card payments by the old slide way with the old impression. Yeah. And then it took 3 or 4 days. It wasn't an instantaneous thing. Yeah. But those kind of things are going to happen to people always. And I try and look at it as the chaos that gets thrown at you as an opportunity. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be sad and upset and angry, because that's important. But at the same time, it's an opportunity to shift where your attention is and how you care for the people around you as much as you can.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity to shift. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn. If everything was just plain sailing all the time, would we grow as much as we could do as individuals? Probably not. But you made me laugh then, George, because I'm thinking about, you're talking about doing stuff in your pajamas. I've got a friend and he's in a very corporate job and He had this was just at the start of COVID. He had his shirt on and his tie on, but he literally had no trousers on, basically. Anything. I'll stop there, but you can tell what's coming next. But yeah, there were some funny stories in the very, very early COVID days, and that's one of them. But cool, George, final question. I used to basically say, which book has had the most positive impact on your career or has made you the best version of yourself? It can be security, doesn't have to be. And by the way, it can be a book, it could be a podcast, it could be online content you're consuming. Just anything that's helped you that could help the listeners, mate.
All right, I'll mention 2 books that aren't security specific. The author Paulo Coelho wrote The Alchemist. And a friend of mine gave me that when I was much younger, and I never really understood it until I was older. But it's the idea of the adventure is important, and the path that you take and where you go is always part of your life. But ultimately, what you've been looking for has always been there. And so doing some self-realization, self-actualization sort of work is cool, but it's like an adventure story about going and meeting and finding people. The real answer you were looking for was always there. And I really like that because it helped me to not feel like I was going backwards when I made changes, like moving back to finish my undergrad in like late 30s. And then I recently read a book about a performer who's no longer with us named MF Doom. And he had a lot of challenges in life, and he took a transition. He was working in the music business. He's a hip hop artist and had some early success. Then his brother passed. And so he had to make a shift on how he approached the art. And as an engineer, I look at what I do as art and stay true to kind of first principles. He was very true to his first principles, and he made some amazing art that wasn't in the forefront. But now that people have found it, like young kids that understand hip hop music the way it was back in the 90s better than they would have because of his art that may not be at the forefront. And I look at it from an engineering standpoint as art, and the idea of as long as you stick with your first principles, you're interacting with complex systems and you're helping to make them better and more robust and protected because you're staying true to what actually works instead of what might be hot inside.
Thanks, George. I think that's quite a good one for the world we live in now as well. Friendly.
Yeah.
Really
most
good.
Definitely.
Thanks, man. I'm glad that we finally got to sit down together, mate, and have a proper good old chat for a good full hour as well. It's been nice. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. I appreciate you reaching out, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and discuss what I love. So,
do you know what, George? Like sometimes these are like mini therapy sessions for me. Like I've had a really stressful morning and stuff, and we came on the microphone. And we've got pile of searches over there that we're working on, and just sitting here now with you, I'm like, yeah, you've just chilled me out nicely. I've enjoyed it, mate. So thank you.
Yeah, me as well. That's awesome, man. We'll stay in touch. Not every day, but we'll definitely keep in touch.
We will. You're not getting rid of me that easy. But yeah, no, cool. Thanks, mate. It's been really nice to see you.